You know, I've done a couple of videos over the past several weeks, basically talking about certain individuals leaving, WWE, if not have already left WWE, and potentially heading towards other pastures, mostly AEW. And I remember doing one video where I did a response to a live stream that JustAlyx, Alex Hicks, did about a week ago or so, where he entitled it the top 10 WWE superstars that he sees jumping ship to AEW in 2022. And even though it was a decent list and I could see where he was coming from with why he felt certain superstars, men and women, were going to head in that direction, the top choice, the number one choice at the end of that list, basically the one he finished it off with, was Kevin Owens, aka Kevin Steen. And Alex, and he has a right to his own opinion, felt that this was the most likely scenario that was going to happen. I mean, with the reports that Owens's current contract was set to expire, officially at the end of January, basically freeing him to go wherever he wants immediately, no non-compete clause and stuff like that attached. Basically he felt very strongly that Owens Steen was AEW bound, and that Sami Zayn would potentially follow him as well. And again, like I said, Alex and anybody else that felt that way, have a right to their opinion. Heck, even I agreed with the fact that it did sound like a good, logical destination for Kevin, in 2022. I even pitched the fact that I believed the best way he could have debuted was in the main event of Revolution. Basically attacking potentially Adam Page if Adam Page was still champion, and then maybe costing him the title, or attacking him after he's retained the title, thus setting himself up to be the next challenger. Well, to say a lot of those assumptions and predictions and almost concrete certainties of Kevin going to AEW, him being the number one choice for Alex and many others to head to AEW when his contract expired, well, they were basically obliterated today. Yeah, they were literally obliterated, because reports came out, and this was one of the first things I saw on Facebook when I woke up this morning, that Kevin Owens has signed a new multi-year deal with WWE, thus remaining with the company for at least another maybe 3 to 4 years at most. And to say that and to say a lot of folks that believed he was AEW bound, in 2022 after January, to say that they were disappointed would be an understatement. I mean, when Alex came on here, and I love what Alex does, I love, what he provides for his channel, I'm one of his biggest supporters. But to say that Alex wasn't happy is an understatement. Because he came out and he did a video, talking about Owens, staying with WWE, and pretty much talking about what certain factors may have played in his decision staying. Mostly him being a family man and needing to provide for his family and stuff like that, and the fact that WWE, WWF has always been his dream job and nothing else. So, he came up with various, reasonings as to why maybe Kevin decided to stay with the company or decided to resign. But to say, after talking about that, to say that he was not thrilled, like I said, is the complete opposite to what he said prior. Because after he talked about the reasonings, the legitimate reasonings, more believable reasonings as to why he felt Kevin stayed with the company, he then decided to basically, I guess you could say, vent his frustration. He decided to vent his frustration, basically stating that he just felt overall it wasn't the right choice for Kevin to make. that he believed Kevin, in his own words, and I'll link the video at the end here, in his own words, is making a huge mistake, and that he's going to learn to regret it. He brings up Claudio Castagnoli, known as Cesaro in WWE currently, as basically making a similar decision. Now, he basically gave an exception to Cesaro, saying that Cesaro's girlfriend is in WWE, so it kind of would make it a little hard for him to go somewhere else. But he said that, in his opinion, he believes Cesaro is regretting the decision he's made to stay with the company. Basically, you know, the company promised him he'd be in main event championship matches, and he was, but now look where he is currently. And he basically feels the same way about Kevin Owens. That Kevin Owens, despite being in a main event program right now with Big E, with Bobby Lashley, and who else is involved? Seth Rollins, you know. Despite being involved in that main event scene, that after day one, after the main event there, you know, he's just going to go back to the upper to mid card. And again, you know, Alex, as I've mentioned a lot of times in my videos when I talk about stuff like this, Alex has a right to his opinion, and so does anybody else. And I'm sure tonight he's going to, you know, elaborate on it more during his AEW Dynamite Winter is Coming review. And I'm sure JD from NY206 is going to do the same thing. I mean, JD, honestly, was one of the first people on Twitter, as far as I know, that talked about this. And you could tell just in, you know, JD's tweets that, again, he wasn't too happy, about Kevin Owens, remaining with the company. He wasn't too thrilled with it. You could tell it. In fact, let me see if I can pull JD up here for a second on Twitter. Let me see if I can pull him up real quickly. Hold on. Okay. So we're gonna see here. Let's see. If it lets me do it. Okay. So. Okay, here we are. He says, and I quote, "This was 4 hours ago, because that's when it was broken, the news was broken that Kevin had resigned. And that was according to Sean Ross Sapp, who's very reliable in reporting, and Fightful.com. This is what JD from NY206 said, and I quote, this is on his Twitter account posted 4 hours ago. He says, and I quote, "I know Tony Khan can't sign everyone, and I'm pretty certain quite a few free agents are coming in soon, but I'm generally shocked Kevin Owens re-signed with WWE. All I hope is that they take care of him creatively as well. Money isn't everything." And he's got a point there, but you can tell that when he says he's, generally shocked that Kevin resigned, it's because, just like a lot of fans, he was hoping Kevin would go to AEW because he feels that money, isn't really that important to those that go to AEW, and that Tony Khan tries to make that pretty much clear. But there are others that will argue, that will argue that the reason people do go to AEW is because they get the same amount of money, if not more so, for just a very short, wrestling schedule, mainly once or twice a week, whatever the case may be, to just go out there and do what they love, just to wrestle, and that's it. But, some people will say that if you think money's not a factor, or isn't everything to them to, have a lesser schedule, to do what they love, then you're kidding yourself, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. I know that didn't make sense trying to, get to that point, but I'm also reading off some other tweets. I'm also reading off some other tweets here from JD. But anyway, like I said, you could tell just in that statement he wasn't too happy. But he does have a point. Money isn't everything when you want to do what you love to do. Do your profession. But like I said, people will look at what JD is saying. They will look at what Alex is saying and others are saying. And they'll be like, are you sure? Because I think money is one of the main reasons they go to AEW. Yes, the attractiveness to be able to go out and wrestle, the way they want to wrestle, and with a lesser schedule, that is a big attractiveness as well. But if you're saying money isn't a main reasoning, like I just mentioned, people will probably say people will probably go to JD on his social media, or Alex and Salamasa and all of them, and say you got to be kidding yourselves. Now, again, like I said, JD's not the only one. All he's hoping is that WWE creatively takes care of Kevin, in the long run. At least lets him be a little bit more, free in what he can do. Now, here's Alex. Here's Alex here. Let's see. Let me hold on. Let me get to it. Okay. This is hold on. This is 3 hours ago when he talked about it. He says, this is JustAlyx, JustAlyx Central on Twitter. This is what he had to say, and I quote, "Color me surprised. Kevin Owens has resigned with WWE, reported by Sean Ross Sapp. Wow. And they must have offered him a deal he couldn't refuse. He'll most likely end up regretting it long term, but hey, as long as he's happy, right?" And then he continues on about an hour later, because he posted that 3 hours earlier. This is what he posted to follow that up 2 hours earlier. He says to follow that up, and I quote, "For those of you saying, are you surprised?" This is what Alex had to say, because he's basically, in his opinion, stating that people are pointing out to him, or asking him, are you surprised that Kevin resigned? This is what Alex had to say in response to that potential question he's getting asked. And I quote, "Kevin passed up creative freedom, a chance to work a lighter schedule, be around friends, make just as much money, and honor his favorite wrestler, Owen Hart, to stay with WWE, who has out main eventers like Bray Wyatt, or to stay with WWE, who has out main eventers like Bray Wyatt." He's not. You could tell he's not too thrilled. And then he follows it up. 56 minutes earlier, or let's see, 55 minutes earlier, this is what Alex had to say, and I quote, this is what he's looking at. Obviously, he was looking at some of his comments and everything when he did his video. Obviously, one of the comments said, "It's Kevin Owens' decision." And Alex says, "I do agree. It is his decision." Another quote he probably got is, "Kevin Owens deserves to be happy." Alex's response, "I never said he couldn't be happy." And then the other two he put, "WWE will help feed his family." And then Alex's response, "So could AEW, plus a lighter schedule gives him more time with them." And then the last one he put from a fan, or someone, I guess, in his comments, "You hating?" And then Alex's response is, "I'm still a Kevin Owens fan." So, here's the thing. I get, like I said, you could just read between the lines with, JD saying he's generally surprised to the way, and him hoping that they, treat Kevin creatively better and money isn't everything, to, what I just read off about Alex Hicks, JustAlyx. You could tell when you read between the lines that they're not happy. Basically, Alex's top 10 video, his live stream, and I'm not trying to laugh or anything here, but his top 10 live stream just imploded. It just got obliterated. It got imploded by Kevin re-signing with the company. Now, Alex has come on record and said he still believes that, Kevin will go to AEW because he thinks Kevin, unless he signs some kind of contract that basically puts a no cut clause in it, he believes that Kevin could be another victim of budget cuts in 2022. We just don't know when. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see if that's true or not. Because if that does become reality, then yeah, Kevin Owens could end up still in AEW. Just not when, a lot of people like Alex was hoping he would. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Because again, I did a video on here where I say you can't assume something's going to happen without, it legitimately happening. I think that's what I said. Let me hold on. Okay. I said we can't, Okay, let me see what the video is. Let me see the title. Okay, this is a video I did. I said, we can only guess, not assume, what Johnny Gargano's future status after December 10th, 2021. We can't assume, we can only guess, not assume, what Johnny Gargano's future status after December 10th, 2021 is. I should have put is in there, but I don't think I had enough. Oh, I did have room. Oh. There we go. Let me correct that. There we go. But basically, the title of the video should have been, and it has been corrected now, that we can only guess, not assume, what Johnny Gargano's future status after December 10th, 2021 will be. In other words, we can't just come out and say, oh, he's going to go here, he's going to go there, on assumption, that we can't do that. The same thing I said similar, the same thing I said similar to Kyle O'Reilly, but Kyle, out of the two, is more likely to show up tonight on Winter is Coming than Johnny was. But then again, that could still happen too. But this is what I said in a video prior to that. I said Kyle O'Reilly's WWE contract up next month, which means I did it last month in November, and fans assume he's AEW bound. Now, like I said, that's more than likely to happen probably tonight, if not in the near future. Same with Johnny. But Johnny's more likely to happen after his wife, gives birth to their child. The thing is, a lot of fans, even then, were assuming that, Kyle would be AEW bound with all the hints and everything being dropped of a possible UE Undisputed Era, Undisputed Elite reunion. And again, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that probably won't happen tonight in some capacity or in the next coming weeks. The thing is, though, you're basing, where he's going to end up and what Johnny's going to end up on assumptions. Mainly, basically an assumption of what you want to see, of what you want. And that's what a lot of people were thinking about Kevin Owens. They were assuming he was going to leave. They saw all the hints being changed on his Twitter account to, coordinates to Mount Rushmore. A picture being put up there of the Mount Rushmore stable that he was part of, along with Cole and the Bucks in PWG. And the Bucks kind of responding. All the stars seem to align, perfectly for the assumptions that he was AEW bound. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And with the announcement that Kevin resigned with WWE for a multi-year deal, it basically caused a lot of those assumptions to, go up in smoke. Just go poof. And, as a lot of people would say, just go poof. And basically dash a lot of potential dream matches people wanted to see. Now, a lot of people could put blame, and when you look at this in the long run, a lot of people could put blame on WWE for, as I put it sometimes, sweet-talking Kevin into staying, saying, oh, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, and then basically relenting on it until maybe his contract comes up again, and then says, oh, now we're going to give you the opportunity, now we're going to do this. So I can understand people's anger with the fact that WWE may have sweet-talked him into staying, with all these promises and all that. But, just like some people, from Alex's point of view, are telling him, or basically as Alex is perceiving it, are trying to tell him, hey, he's got a family to provide for, and everything, it's his choice, and all that, which is true. He has a family to provide for, and it is his choice whether or not to go or stay. We also have to bring in another factor. We have to look at another factor that's outside of WWE. It does have it does relate to him probably resigning, but we have to look at a factor outside of that. And that has to do with his family, mostly his wife. And who's to say that his wife wasn't the one that convinced him to stay with WWE? I mean, he probably danced around, he probably, what's the word I'm looking for? He probably, what's the one I'm looking for here? He probably, flirted with the opportunity, probably flirted with the attractiveness of what AEW had to offer and all that. But I believe, in my opinion, I believe basically his wife may have, convinced him to stay because of the fact that, yes, AEW may have given him, just as much money contract-wise, if not more, with the addition of a lot of schedule and all that. But I'm assuming, not saying it's totally true, but I'm assuming his wife may have said, look, AEW does have an attractive offer they're giving you, but how do you know they're going to be around in the next couple of years? Maybe, in my assumption here, maybe she brought up the fact that they got this contract with the Turner Networks, this big main contract with them for a certain amount of years. And maybe she brought up, not saying she did, but maybe she brought up the fact that what happens if that contract expires, Warner Media, the Turner Networks don't decide to renew, where does AEW go from there? Who do they sign with? She could have brought that up. She could have, she could have brought that up potentially in some capacity, some way, during a discussion, either back in October during the Canadian Thanksgiving, or even maybe visiting family here in the U.S. for Thanksgiving here. She could have brought that up. Maybe his cousins, his relatives brought it up too. And, family can be very influential when it comes to making decisions, like, leaving one place for another. And Kevin Owens' family, mostly his wife, in my opinion, maybe have convinced him that, yeah, AEW is an attractive, is an attractive, place to go, but, how do you know they're going to be around the next couple of years? And maybe they even brought up the fact that, hey, all they do is wrestle once or twice, maybe 3 times a week, and that's it. And then all the other times you got to find work elsewhere. Maybe they brought that up as even though it's a pro, but it's as a positive, but also a con. Like, it's a pro that, yeah, you're going to make just as much money, with them, if not more so, with a lot of schedule, but where do you go from there? Where do you work after that? What other places are going to take you in to give you an opportunity? And maybe that's what convinced him. Maybe the logicness of, hey, you're going to get paid a lot of money for constantly being on the road when you need to be and everything, but you're not going to have to worry, basically, of where you're going to wrestle next outside of your main employer, if you catch my drift. And so I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think his wife had everything to do. His wife and his family, in my opinion, had everything to do with him staying with the company. She could have said, don't resign, go to AEW. She could have done all that, and that's fine. That's great. But she probably looked at the fact that, yeah, they could probably offer you more money with a lot of schedule, but where do you go after that? Where do you go after you do the Wednesday night live Dynamite, maybe the, pre-taped or occasionally live Rampage, the month-long, taped editions of Dark and Dark Elevation? He's like, where do you go from there? Where do you wrestle next? And maybe bringing that up as, hey, live schedule is great, but where do you go from there? As being the con, that might have convinced him. And again, like I said, his family, his wife, may have said, look, with WWE, you're always going to be working. You're always going to be competing every night, for the same amount of pay, you would have gotten with AEW, but just doing it once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week, maybe maybe she convinced him that the better option was, hey, at least with WWE, you don't have to worry about where you're going to wrestle the next day, because you're constantly going to be wrestling for them and getting paid for it every night and getting paid the amount you're promised. So, or you agree to. So to me, like I said, I think she, along with the rest of his family, but mostly she, in my opinion, excuse me there, I think had a stronger influence on him re-signing with WWE than I think WWE did. Yeah, WWE may have sweet-talked him and, said this and that, and, they might, potentially fulfill some of those agreements and obligations and all that as part of the contract, instead of, just waiting, instead of relenting on them and then waiting to the last moment to fulfill them. I think that, besides WWE sweet-talking him with all that, I think above all else, it was his wife. I think his wife, his family, but mostly his wife is the one that convinced him. And she probably gave a good argument, very logical, sensible argument as to why it's better to stay with WWE than to go to AEW or anywhere else. But that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. But again, when I look at, when I watch what Alex had to say, when I, read what he had to say on his Twitter, when I read what JD has to say on his Twitter, you could tell when you read between the lines that they're not happy. They're not happy because everything they assumed and believed almost to a T that was going to happen, they thought legitimately there was nothing going against it. Everything was full throttle of it happening. Pretty much went poof. It imploded. It got obliterated when this announcement came out. And because of that, now I think what's going to happen, now that this has happened, what I'm trying to say is, and I'm trying to look up Solomonster's Twitter page here, but now that this has all happened, I think what's going to happen next is when certain men and women get ready to leave WWE, whether they're released, whether they let their contracts expire or whatever, I think what this does, honestly, is it teaches a lesson. And that lesson is, just because someone may look like they're going to be on the verge of leaving, doesn't mean they are, so don't count your chickens before they hatch. In fact, somebody even brought that up in a Twitter comment on Alex's page when they were talking about Johnny Gargano and where he's going to end up or what his future is. And they basically told him, Alex, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And I'm pretty sure right now that person, that person's probably going to repeat that to Alex, later on in a super chat during his review tonight, or later on his Twitter page saying, see, you were counting chickens before they hatched, and look what happened. So yeah, to me, you could just tell that it was disappointment. So let me see here. Okay, so Solomonster did say something. What did he say here? Let me see. Let me see here. Okay. Solomonster says, and I quote, he put this up about 5 hours ago. He put this up, and I quote, this is Jason Solomonster. Jason Solomon, Solomonster sounds off. But this is what he said, and I quote, 5 hours ago. And this is on his Twitter. Solomonster sounds off. This is what he said, and I quote, I'm sure WWE made him a sweetheart deal to stay. Good for him. If we don't get Edge and AJ Styles at WrestleMania, I would happily take an Edge KO feud, which is potentially what we could get. Because again, that's a possibility. That may have been a promise that they gave him. Like, hey, Edge. I think Edge has said he wants to work with Kevin, right? So a KO rated R, rivalry going into Mania next year, I think we'd be all for it. But that right there, when you read what he has to say, that's kind of a more positive outlook. Like, you could tell, in a sense, again, reading between the lines, you could tell he's a little disappointed, but he's more positive at the potential of what could come out of this. Not like, he's not coming out and saying, oh, I'm disappointed, he's not going to get treated right, blah, 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 blah. He's not doing that. And I'd say that, and I make that parody out of all due respect, no offense. But he's not coming out there complaining or looking at the negative side of things. He's looking at it from a more positive side. And that positive side is what we could get. That's what he's looking at. So, you are going to get some positive outlooks like with Solomonster here. But again, even with the positive outlooks, you're going to get, you could read between the lines that, they're not totally happy that he stayed. aid and everything, just by the fact that, oh, WWE must have made him a sweetheart deal to stay, you could tell that, again, just be reading between those lines, just like with Alex, just like with JD and several others, they're not too thrilled. But, they're willing to accept it. Although Alex, like I said, he's not happy because I think in reality what this does is it makes his, top 10 WWE stars to jump to AEW in 2022 video live stream irrelevant. It makes it basically have no purpose. Because now he looks at that and thinks, oh, great, I just wasted about nearly 2 hours of my life for nothing. And what this also does, like I said earlier, is it makes a lot of people now reevaluate, the thought process of, okay, this person's contract's going to be up, and I believe they're going to be AEW bound without certain. Now it's going to make them reevaluate and be like, yeah, this guy or gal's contract is up, and I hope they'll be AEW bound, but then again, they could resign. In other words, it's going to make them rethink, whether or not, okay, that person's AEW bound potentially when the contract's up, or they're going to stay. So, to me, it's going to make a lot of people reevaluate stuff. But what this also does, too, is it also exposes something that, a lot of the wrestling fans out there, the AEW supporters, AEW diehards, whatever you want to call them, it definitely exposes something about them. And that is the fact that all they really want is their dream matches. That's all they care about. I mean, when, before this announcement got made, everybody was assuming Kevin Owens is going to AEW. Ooh, Kevin Owens against Adam Page. Ooh, Kevin Owens against Eddie Kingston. Ooh, Kevin Owens against CM Punk. Kevin Owens against Bryan Danielson. Kevin Owens against Colt Cabana. Blah, blah, Kevin Owens here. Kevin Owens there. That's what they were assuming. They were assuming Kevin Owens, or correction, Kevin Steen, was going to go to AEW, and they were going to get Kevin Steen, Eddie Kingston, Kevin Steen, CM Punk, Kevin Steen, Adam Page, Kevin Steen, Bryan Danielson, Kevin Steen, Jungle Boy, Kevin Steen, Orange Cassidy, Kevin Steen, Rusev. They thought they were going to get that, and now those dreams have gone poof into extinction for the time being. Now, in closing, I'm not saying that he still won't be AEW bound. Because if there's one thing that Alex did point out that potentially could happen next year, is we could see another round of budget cuts. Or budget cuts, as WWE likes to call them. And Kevin could be part of that. He could be part of that, which would put him on a 90 days non-compete clause before he'd be able to go anywhere. So, I'm not saying, and I'm not ruling out he still won't be AEW bound in 2022. It's just that right now, it looks like he's more than likely going to be a lifer for the remainder of his career. And again, I think it's his wife. I think, honestly, his wife, his family, but mostly his wife, in my opinion, had a major say in basically convincing him to stay. And she brought out the reasonings, the pros and the cons, as to why he should stay and why he shouldn't go to AEW. Stuff like that. So, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. But what are your thoughts, guys? How do you feel about Kevin Owens remaining with WWE? How do you feel about him resigning for a few more years, for several more years? How do you feel about that? Do you think he's making a mistake? Or do you think maybe this might be the last chance WWE has to really, give him that rub, that even though he's been the Universal Champ, the Intercontinental Champ, the US Champ, the NXT Champ, do you think this is the last opportunity WWE has to give him that rub of being, a main event, Hall of Fame bound player for the company that could really help take him to that next level that gets people to, come back to them, from AEW? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about it overall? Do you think he made a mistake? Do you think his wife had anything to do with it in him resigning? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments, as well as the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Check me out at my Teespring store. Also, especially in time for the holidays, get yourself a gift there for yourself, your family, your friends. Also, check me out at BW Rosa's Discussions on all your favorite audio podcast locations, except for Pandora. And if you're listening to the podcast on Anchor.fm, listener support has been activated, so you can help support me there. Also, if you're watching on Spotify or any other outlet that gives you video podcasts along with the audio ones. I do have the video version of my recent Topics on My Mind live stream up and loaded on those platforms as well, courtesy of Anchor.fm. Also, check me out at BW Roses on VENMO for any content you can't get anywhere else, especially here on YouTube due to copyright reasons. Also, check me out at BW Roses on Patreon for the $1 or $3 tiers, as well as check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. I would really like your support there, guys, as well. But let me know what your thoughts are overall. How do you feel about this? How do you feel overall about Kevin Owens re-signing with the company? And do you think, his wife played a role in it? Let me know down below. Comment in the premiere, and I'll talk to you later.